All right. So how did you even get on my calendar? Literally, it was, I think we were supposed to do this Friday, right? At
Yeah,
like 2 or
tomorrow.
something.
Yeah.
I have this on my calendar. I get an email that says, "Hey, can we do it again?" How did that happen?
I mean, our marketing team, I mean, they are looking for great podcasts and great ways to, send the message. So they put it on my calendar. So, and then I just found out and then I realized that, oops, I have another commitment on Friday. So I asked, whether we can move it to Thursday. Thanks for doing that.
Do you have kids by any chance?
Yeah, I do.
Well, you know how kids are always like, "Hey, mom, dad said it's all right," and dad, mom said it's all right if you said it was all right. I think we got done that.
Yeah.
So nice to meet you.
You too?
So I was looking up kind of the company website, trying to read through what you guys are doing. Tell me about your company.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me here. Uptime AI is a company, and what we do is we help companies, or we improve the profitability of manufacturing companies, specifically in heavy asset industries like oil and gas, chemicals, LNG, cement, power generation, renewables, etc. Um, what we offer as a company is a software solution that enables operations teams to run the plants and solve problems like experts, right? So I'll give you a quick example. So, for example, in a refinery, let's say there's a problem, right? Let's say the motor is getting hot, right? What do you do? I mean, you go to someone or senior expert to try and understand why it's getting hot. What do I need to do, right? And the senior expert, what they do is they then say, okay, what is the motor connected to? Is it connected to a pump, let's say, right? And what's the pump doing? It's pumping fluid. And now what's happening with the fluid? The fluid is getting thicker. Oh, that's why the pump is overloaded, and that's why the motor is getting hot. You see, there's a process of actually looking at the symptom of a problem to actually understanding what's causing it, and how to fix it, right? Today, most of that is done by experts, right? However, in this industry, we find that that kind of expertise is going away, and the younger engineers, we don't find people who want to stay in the plant for 30 years to become those experts. So, what do you do when you are losing that expertise? And that's the problem that Uptime AI is solving. So, our solution acts like a virtual expert, which is connecting the dots between your equipment, different types of equipment, different functions like the electrical equipment, mechanical, and the process, to kind of, connect the dots, solve problems, and learn on the fly like an expert. And the beauty is, that's why we call it as an operations excellence solution, because it's not looking at just the rotating, it's not just looking at the process, it's looking at holistically the entire operations.
This sounds dangerously close to AI. Are we talking AI?
Yeah, exactly. So the software name is AI Expert. So it's acting and mimicking how an expert connects dots, solves problems, and learns on the fly.
So I want to actually go wonky and geeky
Yeah,
on
please.
this
Yeah,
in just a
absolutely.
litut bit.
Yeah.
But my mom watches the podcast. So,
Okay.
and she's really sharp. I mean, she went to Rice University, smart cookie. She doesn't know anything about AI. Can
Yeah.
you, because we hear about AI all the time now
Right.
these days,
Right.
simplify it down.
Okay.
Tell me what that is and why are we talking about it now and we weren't talking about it 20 years ago?
Yeah, great question. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of material and marketing, stuff out there to the extent that it's been in some ways, bastardized. So the way we interpret AI in the company, and we use this definition across all functions in the company, is, can it mimic the way people are solving the problems and learning, right? If an application can do those two things, like solve issues the way that a human can do, and learn on the fly, that's what we call it as artificial intelligence based applications. So if you see our solution, right, what we offer, as I said, those two elements are key. A human understands the context, and the context is basically what differentiates between how a human can understand different pieces of elements and solve the problem, right? And what we, for our application, it is able to connect the dots between, your mechanical, electrical, or your process and reliability. That's how a human would do. That's one part. The second part is, can it learn on the fly on its own? It's not it's not automation. A lot of people confuse automation with, AI, but it's not automation. It's about figuring out how to solve the problem on its own, on the fly, right?
Now, let me cut you off just to drill down on that, because I think you're right. You hear that all the time. So automation might be rules are imposed upon the machine,
Right.
and the machine does it in effect
Exactly.
automatically. So
Exactly.
turn off the lights at 8 o'clock.
Right.
If the temperature hits this, shut it off.
Right.
That's automation, but it's not thinking.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you.
So if you say, if you tell a rover to go from here, point A to point B, and you code it up, it will always do that, right? But if you put a chair in between, or a block in between, if it can actually figure out and then move around it and then go, that's actually learning on the fly and solving it, right? And that's what we're calling, right?
Have you seen that with the Tesla self-driving cars that supposedly people are dressing up like stop signs and making the cars stop?
Yeah, I mean, it's the space is evolving quite a bit, right? And it's fascinating to see how these type of solutions are growing.
Right. And so the reason this is happening now, is there kind of a seminal moment of some sort, or is it just the combination of computing power, et cetera, that we've gotten to this point?
Yeah,
because it feels like it's exploded.
Exactly. Yeah. I would say, certainly the compute power, the data availability, right? And the evolution of deep learning and techniques, right? That are used by, some of the software companies around the globe. They've certainly accelerated the journey towards it, right? But also what I would say is, there's a technology and there's a need in the market, right? And when those two are kind of meeting up, that's when the explosion really happens, right? So today, if you see most of the AI-based solutions, they are specific to particular problems. You have, sales agents, right? Which is actually like an AI agent, which is listening to a sales conversation and suggesting what to say, right? Or you have, agents for customer service, but they are all for specific type of problems, and they're adding a lot of value in making people more efficient and more effective.
Gotcha. So before we drill down into what you guys are doing, I kind of got two questions.
Yeah.
One, I'm going to go wonky philosophical on you. But first, is there a way to simply describe how a computer is learning?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, because I get your difference on
Right.
it, but how does a computer actually do that?
See, the best way to explain that is, let's take a child, right? Basically, the child, as they grow up, right, he or she grows up, every time they do something, either a parent or someone, or, there's a feedback, right?
Right.
It's either parent, or they get hurt, or, they get rewarded, right? And that feedback is essentially forming a pattern in their brain, right? Saying that if you do this, this is what is going to happen, right? And those patterns are what are forming that knowledge or that learning, right? The same thing happens with a machine. You call it reinforcement learning, or, basically the machine does something, right? And for example, in our case, the computer or the software is going to tell you, hey, your compressor is fouling, which is why your bearings are going to wear out. And so you should do this, right? And the user, the engineer, can say, yep, this is a great insight. I'm going to do exactly that. Or they may say, it's not as bad as the software thinks it is, right? I'm not going to do anything. And every time they're either doing or not doing, the application learns that, okay, this is good. I should do it more. This is not good. I should try and optimize my understanding. So that's exactly how it's learning.
Oh, wow. And so because what you hear is the internet, all the conversations, whether that's, the repository of Reddit conversations,
Yeah.
Twitter, whatever, you have in effect teachable situations, right?
Right.
You had
Right.
interactions.
Exactly.
So the computers learn how to react. God
Yeah.
help us that they're training us on 2024 conversations. But anyway, so before we jump in, though, I want to address this because I find this fascinating. If you look at the spectrum of opinion on AI,
Mm-hmm.
over here you've got Mark Andreessen.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Andreessen, this is a fancy hammer. It's a tool for humanity. It'll make things better. If it gets too bad, we'll just unplug it. Right.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to say he's utopian.
Yeah.
But I mean, he defends the nuclear bomb as being technology that has made the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
On this side of the spectrum, you have Tucker Carlson, who's literally ready to turn those nuclear bombs onto every data center in America. He views AI as, should we be killing baby Hitler, right? Because it's in its infancy here.
Right.
All that. Where do you shake out on that moral spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, I have opinions on the application of AI, right? I think, most of the time, the technology per se, right, can be used for good, can be used for doing bad things, and it's applicable for everything, right? You can use a rifle for, just recreation and have great time, but you can also use it to, cause damage, right? My stand is that as a technology, it's a great thing because it's going to make life better, right? How we use it is something that it needs to be understood on a case by case basis, and say whether it should be done or it should not be done, right? For example, I have opinions on, like, I'll give you a short example. Like, let's take YouTube Shorts, okay? The shorts or the quick videos that come on YouTube. Right?
Yeah.
Now, even for an adult, right, when you open it, okay, I find it hard to actually stop it, in less than 5 minutes, right?
It's crack cocaine.
Yeah, exactly, right? Now, okay, for an adult, it's fine, right? But if you start those with, for kids, right, you don't stand a chance to go against the intelligence in terms of how it's picking the video that would engage you, right? Kids don't stand a chance. I mean, if you, and so how much where do you apply? How do you apply it? I think, I think there's a balance to be had there.
So I am proclaiming you AI guru of the world.
Oh.
So I have bestowed upon you this prominent position.
Uh-huh.
You get to make all the rules that we have to live by. Flush it out. What are the rules? Give me some basic rules you're going to put in place. Are you going to age limits on AI applications? I'm making you get to set all the rules.
Okay.
You are you're the drafter as well as only signer on the AI constitution of the world.
So one thing, right? I mean, this could be controversial, but one thing I'd say is, instead of making a lot of specific rules, right? Because it's very hard to make so many different rules. But one thing I would say is, if someone is putting a product out there in the market, right? If someone is putting a product out there in the market, and if it has a negative repercussion on a certain person or certain people, right? If you make them liable for that, right?
Attach civil liability
Yeah,
to it.
yeah. And then I think then everyone who's who's utilizing or putting AI out there, right, or AI-based applications, they're going to be thinking about, is it actually causing any harm, right? What I find, I think, in some of the cases, if you just put an information out there, piece of information out there, and it's coming from somebody else, and you're just using your platform to put that out there, it's okay. You're just providing a platform to put the information out there, and it's not your opinion. However, if you take that piece of information and you're magnifying it, or you're essentially, exponentially increasing the visibility of that by picking whom to show and whom not to show and how much to show, then you have essentially a responsibility in terms of how you're doing it, and that responsibility should not be taken away. As an example, right? So what I would say is that responsibility and that liability, if you put it on people who are putting the AI, I think the world will figure out how to do it in maybe, more. It will never be 100% positive, right? But then I would think that it would be more positive than negative, and I think that's the way to go.
It's so I do another, in addition to Chuck Yates Needs a Job, I do BDE. We call it the weekly summary of the energy business for people that think Jim Cramer sucks. But one of the things we've done this year is, this is the year of democracy. I mean, I think over 1 billion people are going to go vote. India's having elections right now as we speak. Obviously, the United States election. I want to say it's 75% of the largest democracies are having their elections this year. And one of the things we've noticed, because we're breaking down each one of these individual elections, is it's scary, the impact of AI. I mean, you're having video generated speeches by candidates that are put out there, and
they're not true.
They're not true.
Yeah.
And it happened in the United States. There was robocalling in, I forget which primary it was, one of the state primaries, where it was Joe Biden's voice.
That. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, part of me says, well, okay, that's really bad. We're going to regulate it. But the libertarian inside me goes, who are we going to get to make that decision?
Yeah. I mean, that's always tough. And that's the toughest part, right? Like, who decides? And I'd say, I mean, eventually they would get decided by the Supreme Court, right? Because somebody is gonna make a case, and it's gonna go to Supreme Court, and it's gonna be decided one way or the other, and it will set a precedent. But we have a system, or every country has a system, and I think I mean, essentially, the either it's going to be the court, or it's going to be the elected body that's gonna make that make those laws.
No, I'm in a breakfast club, and one of the members of the Texas Supreme Court came and spoke to us this morning. And it was fascinating because in the state of Texas, we actually elect our justices. And that's a little different than the federal system, appointed for life, approved by the Senate. And it's rooted in the Texas Constitution, which says all sovereign power of the state is invested in the people. And the people, in effect, are allowing elected officials to act on their behalf. And we tried to put tight chains on them, because we were definitely afraid as a people, because this is post-Civil War, that those damn Yankees are going to come down and try to, because we weren't, as Southerners, we weren't allowed to hold office. But we got to write our Constitution.
Yeah. But I mean, it makes sense. Ultimately, whether it's the justice in the Supreme Court or the Senate, they are representation of what the people want in the country, right? And I think, that's what defines, and that's what's great about democracy, because, if the society wants it to be a certain way, then, it goes in that direction, regardless, right? And I think there's no absolute right or wrong. There are, it always is dependent on the context and dependent on the society and the culture.
And there are always trade-offs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's no perfect answer.
Yeah, it's going to be
Ever.
fascinating watching how this plays out. So let's go back to industrial world.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? What are you doing with your life that makes you go, man, I want to go be a software entrepreneur?
I'd say, I always enjoyed building things, right? My dad, he's an engineer, and he basically managed some of the water treatment plants and purification plants, etc. So I grew up, watching some of the heavy industries.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in India.
Okay.
Yeah, and so back when I was growing up, I always enjoyed that engineering side, just tinkering and breaking things and putting things. And I think there is always something special about building something from scratch, right? Or making something and something that can help others and makes an impact. And I think that was always something that stayed. I mean, I did projects where I worked on cars. I basically did projects at home, and I think that's also something that's great about US is essentially there is that culture of building things and doing things from scratch. So and that's what I would say always drove me to start a company, right? And then I was always looking at ideas or what is a problem that I'm passionate about that I want to really dig in, because it's a journey that you have to be passionate about. And before Uptime AI, I was working at I spent about more than 20 years working in the industrial analytics or industrial application space, specifically about applying analytics to industrial problems. First 10 years doing pure analytics for all the way from automotive, aerospace, to pharma and oil and gas companies. Next, about 8 years, I worked at GE, managing some of their product lines and focusing on AI and deep learning based solutions for oil and gas. So I saw how challenging it is to manage operations in a plant. It's a very complex environment. There is safety aspects, significant safety aspects involved, right? It's a harsh environment. And it's also very hard for people to just understand, people who haven't been to those kind of, a refinery or a chemical plant, to understand what it is like there, right? And I worked a lot with senior experts as well who have lots and lots of stories. I mean, we have a chief subject matter expert in our company, right, who has over 40 years of experience, in the industry, advised over 150 different plants across the globe. And so I've heard all these stories, right, and about the difficulties, the challenges, how they solve the problems, and that problem and my interest in building something really connected together. And so right after GE, that's when I decided that, okay, this is a problem that's worth solving and making an impact on the entire manufacturing industry. And that's how, I jumped into it.
Because what you just described is way more articulate way of what we try to do around here at Digital Wildcatters. Is we're a little more folksy about it. It's like the great crew change is happening.
Yeah.
And all this vast information about even something as simple as drilling a conventional vertical hole.
Yeah.
When that guy dies, it's gone, right?
Exactly.
Being able to knowledge capture and then transfer to other folks is so important.
Absolutely.
And it feels like in the energy business we're 15 years behind the rest of the world.
Oh yeah,
in terms of doing it.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that the crew, the old crew, right? I mean, there are different terms like the gray hair and silver tsunami, right? And the thing that really stuck in my head, is this is what motivated, what was the crucial point for starting Uptime AI, I would say is, I was actually in an airport flying back from London to the States. And we just finished a workshop with one of the oil and gas companies in London, and I was flying back with one of our SMEs, right? And we're sitting in the airport, and our SME gets a call, and he tells me, "Jag, I can't fly back to the States. I got to fly to Malaysia. The client is having a problem in one of the plants, and they're asking me to fly in immediately." And I know the client, in Malaysia, and I looked at the SME and I told him, look, I know they have all the digital tools, right, in the market. They have best in the breed, solutions, digital tools,
Sensor on everything.
sensors, etc. Right? Why do they need you, right? And why so urgently? And he looked at me and he smiled and said, "Jag, your tools tell him that there is a problem. I'm the one going there to tell them why it's happening, what's causing it, how to fix it. And even better, I'm going to do it even faster the next time another client calls me. So I'm much smarter than anything that you have," right? and that was a lightning bulb moment, right? Or light bulb moment, right?
Right.
And that kind of stuck with me. And after I left GE, or Baker Hughes GE, then I was thinking about different ideas, and this was one thing that really stuck in terms of how the industry, right? It has a lot of thermometers and blood pressure machines. They kind of give you indications of where problems are, which is great. I mean, there's value there, right? But in order to take and leapfrog to the next level of efficiency, right, we have to put that expert into a computer and make it available for every young engineer who's trying to, run these plants. And that was essentially the goal for starting UptimeAI.
Well, and the other thing you have to do, and part of the reason I'm a libertarian is at a very, very young age, I was fascinated by the assassination of John F. Kennedy in Dallas. I've been to Dallas a million times. If you and I ever go to Dallas, we're walking around the grassy knoll for 3 hours until you finally say, "I give, Chuck. I don't want to have to." So I've always been incredibly cynical. And I'm going to say this, part of what you just described, the other thing that needs to happen is that expert needs to be challenged too, because so many of the biases of 30 years of doing something a certain way was based on data, and you were only able to measure this much of the data, not this much. And so I think the next step of that is, we got to really make sure that expert is right. One of the things I've noticed is a lot of times when we'll take over operations of a field and you literally change the incentive structure for a pumper from, I want so many barrels of oil a day, to giving them their own little profitability statement.
Right.
They always run the pumps slower. They make a little less oil, but they spend way less on upkeep. And
exactly.
everything. Yeah. So
that's a great point. I'll give you an example around that. There was, you see, today what we have in operations, right? Whether it's refining or chemicals or whatever it might be, you have different functions. For example, you have reliability team typically consisting of mechanical engineers. You have electrical engineers who are monitoring electrical equipment. You have chemical engineers doing process work, right? And so you have all these different functions, right? Now, the profitability of your operation is not going to be based on just, keeping the machines running all the time, because, you can keep the machines running all the time, but if it's consuming more energy, more raw material, more fuel, it's still not
shortening
profitable.
Equipment time.
Exactly. So the point is, if you want to really improve the profitability, you have to look at it holistically, right? Which is exactly what you said. You just can't run it all the time to pump, more oil, but, you have to actually look at optimizing it, right? And so the challenge, though, is when we have a case where a customer came to us and said, that team was reliability team. They told me that, hey, we have a pump that's failing every 9 months. And we want to resolve that, but we replace it and it still keeps failing, and there's nothing wrong with the pump. So we said, okay, let's look at it as a system, and let's look at what's around it. And then we took all the data and the sensor information around, not just a pump, but the reboiler, the tower, because it was a bottoms pump in a tower, and put it in the application. And we showed them that, hey, it was essentially a reboiler that was fouling, which is causing polymerization in the tower, which is making the fluid really viscous and thick. And that was essentially what is causing the pump to fail. And then the mechanical engineer was super happy. He said, well, now I know it's not my problem. It's actually the process engineer's problem. But the point is, it's, unless you're trying to look at it holistically, right? You're not going to go to the next level of, efficiency, because we have reached a stagnation point where every function is using their own little tools, right? There are point tools for different functions, and they're using those, and it's great, for what they have been doing so far. But if you want to break that ceiling and you want to achieve that next level of efficiency and operational excellence, you got to look at them, together. And typically the reason why experts are counted as gold is because they are typically the ones who do that kind of work, right? And that's what, we want the application to do by connecting those dots.
I'll tell you my favorite kind of data story, because you've been talking to experts, and I totally get we need to capture and all that. But the other thing too, with the level of detail now in data that we have, and just the computing power, being able to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite stories is, I'm going to kind of change the details to protect the innocent, but one of the large oil and gas companies hired a data scientist from like HEB,
Mm-hmm.
someone who knew nothing about oil and gas. I think this person was maybe 25.
I think I know where this is going, but yeah, go on. Yeah.
Well, and so anyway, one of the things they wanted to look at was expenses basically surrounding the pumpers, truck costs, all this sort of stuff. And she studied the data and came back and just said, if a pumper will never put their truck in reverse, I forget what the stats were. It was like, it'll drop operating expenses 75% and it'll drop REX 44%, or vice versa, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, the old pumper's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Hell, that ain't right. Well, so anyway, they just redesigned, a couple of pumpers' routes,
right,
and you never went into reverse, and the numbers were almost exactly right.
Right.
It's amazing how just looking at the whole with just pure data.
Exactly. I mean, there are, like you said, there are ways that people are used to working, and there's a reason for why, people work the way they do today, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that there are better ways. The constraints that people had when they designed the systems, the way they're using it now, they might not be there today. And I think, many of these technology tools are helping them figure out what those, the new normal for operation could be.
Yeah. So you start this company.
Yeah.
Give me some entrepreneurial battle stories about starting a company. Craziest thing that happened that you never would have thought when you started a company.
I don't know if I can say the craziest thing, but we started, and then COVID hit.
Oh, nice.
Can that count as craziest thing? Yeah. So we started end of 2019, right? And within the company, we have our technology team is located in Bangalore, and we have commercial teams in the U.S. Today, we have commercial teams in the U.S., Canada, Middle East, etc. But back in the day when we started, it was just two people, me and my co-founder. My co-founder lives in Bangalore, and we know each other for close to 30 years, believe it or not. And so I went to India. And I was in Bangalore for the first, couple months, trying to set up the team and starting to essentially, do some R&D and build the application, etc. And then I came to the US, I think in February of 2020, after a couple of months.
You brought it. You're patient zero.
And then I was actually at a conference in San Diego. And then, after half a day, right, the organizers came in and announced, it's done, it's shut down, go back, right? And that was 2 months or maybe 3 months into the company, right? I mean, it was essentially, we didn't know what was going to happen because nobody was taking, new initiatives.
It
Everybody
was
trying
2
to figure
weeks,
out.
right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
what we were talking about at
exactly.
first. Yeah,
exactly.
Flatten the curve, 2 weeks.
Exactly. And then, it slowly started increasing. But, it's always one thing we've always, I always look at it as, there's always ways to work around things and kind of, figure out what's the right thing to do at that time, given the constraints, right? And so we looked at things and we said, okay, I mean, this is the time a lot of people were laid off, right? And we hired good talent. Everybody was working remotely, and we put our heads together and we worked, constantly, tried different techniques, different approaches, and we spent almost 2.5 years in the garages to come up with a solution that would really work, but not only working, but also, the speed of deployment. We didn't want to build a data science platform, right? We were not building something where we were going to give it to a software engineer and say, here's all your platform, you can build whatever you want to build. We wanted to build it for the people who are actually in the plants, in the trenches working, right? We wanted to give them a solution. And that essentially meant that, we wanted to give them a solution that would be ready in 3 weeks for a full unit. Because otherwise, today what you find is you get, if you want to do something more advanced, the company will have to get, maybe software engineers and say, let's build it ourselves. And it can take up to, whatever, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. We have, clients who spent like 3 years before trying so many different things. And then, eventually figured out it would be so much easier with Uptime AI because, it takes 3 weeks to deploy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love hearing that story. One of the things I think we often overlook in life is we talk about how when you're given a fresh slate or, clean slate on something, that's when you're most creative. And I don't believe that at all. I actually think when you're boxed into the corner, that's when the creativity come out.
Absolutely.
I think it was Samuel Beckett that wrote the play Waiting for Godot.
Mm-hmm.
He actually learned French to write the play or write the story because the constraint of learning a new language and not kind of just resting on colloquialisms and made him write a story that said exactly what he wanted to say.
Right. And it's totally true. I mean, I would say sometimes I also feel that I think, even at startups, right? Too much money is also not good, because the constraints actually force you to come up with innovative approaches in solving problems. And that exactly is what is going to drive that push to make it better and better and better, right? So yeah, I completely agree with that.
So give me a good initial story of like your first sale or your first implementation or something like that. I mean, how does that discussion go? I'm Mr. XYZ plant manager.
No, that's it was essentially a great experience. Even though my experience, I did consulting, right? I did consulting for about 10 years, and then I managed products at GE for 7-8 years. But I was not into pure sales, right? I was never into pure sales. So as a founder, you're going and you're essentially talking to a prospect or and I've always one thing I was very clear from the very beginning is, sale is a way of, you solve problem for someone and you get a portion of the value that you're providing, right? And I always wanted the company to stay true to that, right? And so we were very upfront. We were very straightforward with our clients. We said, the first sale that we made was we went to the client and we said, this is our vision. This is what we want to actually, we're developing. We know how we want to do it, but this is the idea, right? We told them we don't have any other clients, right? This is the first one, and but the idea was compelling for that company, right? We presented it to head of operations for one of the companies, power generation companies, and they said, you know what? If you do this X, Y, Z, I'll see that you're good for it, and then we'll essentially go for it. So we said, okay, it's a challenge, we'll take it, and we essentially took that challenge. We did it, and we did it extremely well. The problem that they gave us was there was a major failure, right? There was a major failure in the plant, and after that failure, they went to the OEM, right, of that equipment. They said, this major failure costed us, millions and millions of dollars of loss. And they asked, OEM, what just happened? Because we have so many other equipment and we don't want any of those fail like this, right? And the OEM said, there's nothing wrong with the equipment. It could be in the grid, it could be something else, right? And then the company then went to an engineering research company and said, what's wrong with the grid? OEM is saying something wrong with the substation or wherever the transmission is happening, right? And then they looked at all of that and they said, nothing wrong here either, right? And so the head of operations, what is asked us is, if you can figure out why that's happened and when it happened, I'm not going to tell you where and what, but if your application can figure it out, then I'm going to work with you, right? And we took that challenge, we found it, and the application was able to find it, like 4 months before it actually failed. And after that, they just deployed it for their whole unit. That was the first sale.
Oh, nice. I love that.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, we also ask our customers, right? And even after they sign up with us, we ask them, why did you sign up with us? This is a space where a lot of big companies are there and a lot of, solutions are in the market. So we asked them, why did you sign up with us? And one of the most common things that our customers always say is trust, right? They say that, you didn't tell us that you're going to do everything, right? You said, you're going to do these 4 or 5 things, and whatever you said you're going to do, you did it extremely well, and you did it in a way that nobody else was doing. And I think, and I always say that, we want to be respectful and make sure that there is value that is being provided. We're solving the problem and we're truthful to what we're doing. And I think, the revenue and the brand and the sales are going to happen.
Yeah. No, that's cool, and that's really good advice. So, how'd you finance the business? Did you go out and raise VC?
Yeah.
Friends, family? How'd you do that? Give us a little color there, because everybody listening to a podcast with an entrepreneur always wants to go, how'd you get the money?
Yeah. So when we initially raised friends and family, right? That's how we set up the shop, and we kind of started essentially hiring people.
I talked to a CEO, an entrepreneur yesterday.
Yeah,
and I added another F: friends, family, and fools. It's always.
Yeah. But we have my co-founder. This is his second startup, right? So his first startup was pretty successful, and there were friends and family who invested in that, and so he showed how it could be positive, it could be beneficial, and of course we have reputation within our circles that that people were willing to trust us, right? So first was friends and family, which was a small round, which was a safe round. And after
What's
that,
a safe?
so safe is like you don't actually put a valuation on the company, because when you are so young and you're collecting, or you're essentially, getting the money from friends and family who are not necessarily institutional investors, right? They don't know how to evaluate the company. They're basically trusting the founders. So what we do is we make it as a safe round. What that means is um, there's a bottom line. There's a like an catch, like there's a net where if the valuation goes down, it can't really go down below a certain limit, but there is upside. If someone comes in tomorrow and puts a value on the company and the valuation is even higher, they still get at the net. So essentially, what it means is there is a protection for the bottom side, right? For on the downside, but there is benefit on the upside, right? So it makes it simpler. And when you go to a VC, when you get the money and they put a valuation, the safe actually shares would convert at that valuation. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's actually the reason I asked is we've raised some money I think we've raised $4.5 million today at Digital Wildcatters. And I want to say the first 2 million of that was a safe.
Yeah.
And it's basically, hey, if the company blows up, you get the money back first. It's kind of like a note in that. But at the end of the day, we'll discuss valuation when we have a pricing round.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's exactly that.
So you did that, but then you raised institutional capital later?
Yep, we did. And we raised it in the middle of COVID, because we didn't know how long it was going to happen so we raised it in the middle of COVID, about May, June of 2020. That was the first, I would say, pre-seed, right? And then after that, we raised another round last year, end of 2022. And that was our seed round, right? And now we're basically in the process of closing for Series A.
Nice. Yeah. So give me as many as you want, but at least one or two bits of advice for a CEO who's out trying to do what you just did.
Yeah. So one of the things that is important to understand is, fundraising is it takes time, right? Dedicated time. And the best way to do it is to be prepared, right? And by preparation, I mean, you're trying to convince someone that this is a business that's going to grow to 100 million over, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is, right? And the other person doesn't really understand exactly what you're doing, right? I mean, they may have general idea. So they're going to ask for clarifications, material, information, right? And you as a founder have to provide that, that kind of information and knowledge and convince them. So that requires some collateral, some material, right? Whether it's about competition, whether it's about your own company, whether it's about, revenues, whatever it might be, right? So the first thing I would suggest is, make sure that you have all that collateral prepared, number one. Second, not every VC is going to invest in every type of business. Second, you're on the energy space, find institutional investors who have a focus in the energy space. Find investors who focus on the specific market that you're targeting, right? And then you create a list of all the VCs who you think are good, for the business that you're building. Third, I would say, then make sure either you have contacts or, how can you reach out to the VCs, right? So that you have a warm connection instead of, throwing in just a random email. I'm not saying, don't throw a random email, but, you have a better chance of getting your time with the VC when you have a warm connection. So those, I would say, are, if you do that well, then you're basically going to be very efficient in that process. Because one of the challenges for a founder when they're raising the money is you lose a lot of time focusing on raising the money instead of building the business, right? And that's huge. I mean, and so
I think that's been Colin's big realization about fundraising. He's just, holy crap, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's a full-time job.
Exactly. Yeah.
One other thing I'll say about fundraising that I try to tell entrepreneurs, and you tell me whether this is good advice or crappy advice, but one of the things I see too often is a founder is trying to, and I hate to be, pardon my French here, but they try to get laid on the first date. And I keep saying, no, this is like dating.
Yeah.
You want the next date.
Right.
So you can sit there and have a fight about some arcane detail and try to prove the VC you're correct. That's great. You may have won the battle, but you lost the war because that person's going to be next. It's you're trying to educate enough so they'll invest more time, because ultimately at the end of the day, they're gonna have to spend a lot of time with you to cut a check.
Right.
You just want them to spend more time with you.
Right. I completely agree. I think it's like a sale, right? I mean, you can't just convince someone about something that you've built over, years and years of knowledge, or, your understanding of the market. And you can't impart all of that knowledge in a single call. It's very difficult, right? And you have to be patient, and you have to explain why this is the best thing that you're doing and how this is going to create an impact, both from a revenue perspective as well as from a society perspective. And I think it's important. I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah. So tell me who, of all the vast majority of the world that listens to this podcast, but of folks listening to the podcast, who do you want picking up the phone and calling you or emailing you? Who's kind of, if your customer is everyone in the world, how do you narrow that down?
Yeah. What I would say is any manufacturing operations, right? People, companies who have manufacturing operations, especially in the heavy asset space, and more specifically in the process industries, right? So for those folks, if you're looking to improve your operational excellence, right? You either you've stagnated, either you are trying various types of solutions, they are not giving you the results, it's taking too long for you, your operations teams are not accepting, you can't find the ROI because your management doesn't see the return after 2 years. Those are the folks, call us. We will show how we can deploy in a matter of weeks. In every customer where we have deployed, we have a record of 100% success with scaling up almost within a year. And so we will show how we do it. And at the end of the day, I mean, we want to also help the industry, right? Kind of see what is available in the market. And we always tell them, at the end of the day, if it fits their needs and if it fits their, business objectives, we're happy to work together and see. Yeah.
So what's kind of a ballpark that the software may cost?
Yeah.
I mean, if you told me $100 million, that wouldn't surprise me. If you told me $75,000, that would surprise me as cheap. But ballpark, what do these solutions look like?
Yeah. So what I would say is it certainly will depend on how big the plant is, what are we covering, right? But typically, most of our clients, anywhere between let's say 150,000 to 300,000 is essentially where they would typically start. Right. And go from there. Right. But it always depends on, the size of the operation.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So how do people reach you? Website, you LinkedIn, Twitter? How do people run you down?
Yeah.
Email, whatever you want to give.
Yeah. So we have, our website is UptimeAI.com. Right. It's not uptime.ai. It's actually UptimeAI.com. Because people are always confused with that. And there are essentially, we have, there's an option to request for demo, find people there. There's a chat. You can always, chat with someone on the website as well. But you can also reach out to us at info at uptimeai.com. And certainly one of our team members is going to certainly reach out to them.
Cool. Well, Jag, I appreciate you coming on. It was nice surprise to just have something dumped on my calendar like this.
No, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the range of the conversation was really, really good, all the way from AI to
I didn't take my ADD medicine this morning, so what the hell?
No, it was good. It was good. Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show. Really a pleasure. Bye.
Absolutely.